Hey besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm joined obviously by a very special guest, Pira Nessie. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Pira, that's the guest.
Today I'm going to be doing another episode of TBR Takeover, and I thought it would be really special if I had the person who's going to tell me what to read be in the vlog. As I'm sure many of you are aware, this is Cindy from the channel With Cindy.
Hi, this is my debut on Sarah's channel.
No. We both are visiting Elias in LA for his birthday, and I thought while I had him and her together, I was like, guys, what if we filmed intros to TBR Takeovers?
Yeah, it's up-leveling.
Yes,
your
really.
videos now.
It's in person now. So if you aren't aware of this series, essentially what I do is I have my booktube friends send me recommendation videos where they tell me 3 books to read, and then I vlog reading them. And so in the past we've just had the booktubers sending me clips, but obviously because I'm with Elias and Cindy, they both are doing it in the flesh.
Boom. The books that I'm gonna give to you are gonna be books that I also thought had good writing and are a little bit weird. The first book I think is like gonna be a safe option because this one was already on your TBR.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that the writing is weird, but I think that the writing is still good, even though if it's not like beautiful prose.
Okay.
So what's on your TBR and what I read recently is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Oh, I've been wanting to read this.
Yeah. I figured it's like a safe book for me to pick for you because like it is generally liked by a lot of people. I think it won like Goodreads choice for like fiction. And I liked it. I actually was pleasantly surprised when I started the book because 2 chapters in I was like, damn, okay, this shit actually could be good. So the book is basically about 2 friends making a video game, and that's the entire book.
Really?
Yeah, that's the entire book. But I thought that it was a good like love letter to not just like video game fans but also creative storytellers because they're super passionate about making a video game together. I don't game, I don't really care about gaming, but I feel like as a creative person it was cool to see like their creative process, how they kind of bump heads a lot when they are trying to figure out like what story they want to tell. I thought that the writing was really good in the sense that
the traffic and then Pira meowing in the background.
I thought that the writing was pretty good in the sense that it fully developed the characters a lot, and you really like they feel like actual people. So I'm very curious what your thoughts on it because I didn't like some of the choices that were made in the story I didn't necessarily like agree with, but I think it's a good book to discuss. Okay. So you can tell me what you think about it after you finish.
I'm excited because I do play video games, so I think it might be a fun book to read because I actually like gaming.
Oh wait, actually, we were talking about dysentery the other day because Sarah kept on like pooping everywhere throughout the week. This bitch has digestion issues.
What do you mean? Hey, hot girls have tummy troubles.
Somehow we talked about dysentery, which is when you die by like pooping too much, right? There's like blood.
You poop blood, I do not do that, by the way.
But I'm just saying like what could be next for you. There was like a reference in the book with they have an ongoing joke where like, oh, my sister died from dysentery, to which Sarah recognized the video game reference.
The Oregon Trail.
Yeah, I don't know anything about video games, but that was a reference.
That's like a childhood video game that people like played in like elementary school. Like everybody's like, I feel like every school computer had Oregon Trail on it, and you could just like play it.
Okay, I think you might like this book then because they make references to like childhood games. Yeah, and it's like kind of interesting to see like the way that they think of like what the story behind the game and how they're gonna piece it together, like the effects and everything. So I think you'll like it. Okay, so the next book that I'm gonna put on your TBR Takeover, I don't know how you'll feel about it, but I was trying to think of like another book that has similar beautiful prose in a way that maybe it's not like a straightforward story. And this book is not fiction, it's non-fiction, it's a memoir, and it's called In the Dream House by Maria Carmen Machado.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how you'll feel about it, but I thought that writing was really good. She talks about her experiences with her abusive relationship, but the way that she writes it is like through these vignettes, and they're framed as like kind of like a horror narrative. And so I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's interesting, but it's a memoir.
Yeah, it's a memoir because she writes from her experiences.
Is it like a magical realism memoir? Like, is there like fantastical stuff in it?
No, I think she just uses common like horror, like
Like analogies and similes and stuff?
Yeah, or like, you know how when you read horror books, there's very atmospheric writing, and I think she kind of applies a similar thing to this memoir. I saw a criticism of it where someone was like, I couldn't get through this book because it was too much like MFA writing for me. But I like that kind of writing, so I don't know. I'm curious what you think. And then the third book is also something that I don't think you would have picked up otherwise. This one, I'm saving it for the third one because it's more outside your comfort zone, because you don't read YA and this is gonna be a young adult book. I just want to see where your boundaries really are, because you used to read young adult but you're not into it anymore, because like I understand because it feels like more juvenile and it just doesn't hit the same way. But I read it last year and I enjoyed it, and I thought that the writing was really atmospheric and creepy and eerie. So this is called House of Hollow.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's about these 3 sisters that went missing when they were children, and then when they came back they were like totally different. They started growing white hair.
Were the ones that are growing the flowers out of their skin?
Yeah, there's gonna be like weird imagery throughout it, so it gets kind of grotesque, but it's described in a very feminine, ethereal way. And I just thought that the concepts were interesting and very atmospheric, and I liked it. The vibes were vibing in my opinion, so I am just curious about all your thoughts on these books. So those are 3 that I picked.
So it'll be a fun little vlog. So I guess the next time you guys see me, I'll be reading Cindy's picks.
Yeah, Cindy, you can rank them later, see which one hit and which one flopped.
Right, and then Cindy will find out with you guys as I'm vlogging it. Do I like these books? Do I not? Okay, besties. So I finished In the Dream House, and I really, really enjoyed it. The writing in this is extremely haunting and beautiful. The imagery that she decided to use was just so exquisite. So as Cindy mentioned, this book is about her abusive relationship that she had in her early 20s. And so she just spends a lot of time using all these different analogies, using all this different language that is just so delectable, so exquisite to read. I feel like I'm trying to think of other words to use besides those. It just was really good. I feel like something that added to the haunting quality of this book was that she chose to write a lot of the scenes out of order. So she's giving us some good times and bad times of the relationship all at once. And another really fantastic thing she did with her writing is she chose to write in second person when she was talking about the years that she was in this relationship, and she did not switch over to first person until the end when she was sort of reflecting on what had happened to her. And it was just such an interesting exploration of what abuse looks like in a female-female relationship. And most of the abuse that Carmen faced was mental, and so she doesn't have a lot of physical scars to kind of show for this time in her life. And so it's a lot about just the mental turmoil that she went through, and it was just so beautifully written. I don't really know what else to say besides that it was beautifully written. I would love to reread this sometime. The only thing I did not like about this book, and the reason that I'm giving it 4 stars, is because she's incredibly intelligent, but she loves to refer to movie and television a lot. She definitely makes it so that if you haven't seen the thing she's talking about, you can get the context, but I just didn't really enjoy that because it was a lot of media that I'm not familiar with, and I felt like it took me out of the story of her actual memoir about her life. I was more interested in her relationship and what she was going through mentally than I was in the parallels she could be drawing from these different medias. The only other thing that I didn't quite get, not that it was bad, but I just didn't personally get, was that she was using this dream house metaphor to describe the relationship. So every chapter had a name where it would be like dream house as blank, and she would say some sort of noun or unrelated thing, and I didn't really like understand the chapters. I feel like I'm just not intellectual enough, so it was really lost on me, and so I didn't love it. I didn't hate it either, and I feel like if you are a smarter gal than I, then you will probably like those aspects. I actually looked up some articles about this book afterwards because I was also very curious about who her ex-girlfriend was, because I am pretty sure she is a professor somewhere and she also does writing. So I was curious to kind of like see, because she didn't name her in the book. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but she also refers to her partner as her throughout the book. So she's just she and her, and she doesn't really get a name, which I think is really interesting. And then one of the only characters that does get a name, I guess not characters because they're real people, but the only person who does get a name in the book is Val, who is the person that she did end up marrying in real life. I keep saying in real life as if this was a fake story. It's not a fake story. She writes it so masterfully that it does kind of feel like fiction, because I was just so compelled to listen to the imagery and the things that she was saying. So it kind of felt like a fiction book, but it wasn't. I would compare this book to On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. That book is not quite a memoir. It is a novel that is heavily based on his life, but the writing is like on the same level, where it's just so good. It's just done so well, and the story is sad, it's heartbreaking. There's discussion of so many important things, and I definitely want to read more from Miss Carmen. I feel like she just really did her story justice with this, and I'm very sad for her that this happened to her. It's very clear that she has a lot of trauma from this abusive relationship, but I really enjoyed it. I feel like it's a weird thing to say about someone's trauma, but it was very masterfully written, and I feel like that is the most important part that you need to know. I have finished House of Hollow, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, but I have to admit, the whole time I was reading it, I kept thinking to myself, this would be so much better if it was an adult novel. That's not to say that young adult is bad, that it's a bad category. That is not the case at all. I just prefer adult novels at this point in my life. I feel like there was just this one point in my 20s where I got more towards my 30s and I was like, you know, I don't like young adult anymore. And there's something about the quality of young adult writing that's not bad, but it's just not what I'm personally looking for. And so this was very beautifully written. Don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted. I did really enjoy this book. There was just something about the main character Iris being 17 that I feel like would have been vastly improved if she was in her mid-20s-ish or even just early 20s, like college age. Like the fact that Gray, the oldest sister, was only 19 just kind of took me out of it. For some reason, I felt like I was reading about much older characters, and I would have just liked it a lot better if that were the case. I did really enjoy a lot of the imagery. I loved the way that the story unfolded. I did predict what was going on, but I still really liked it. It just had a sort of like whimsical gothic air to it, and I feel like if you like dark stories that kind of feel like a fairy tale, you would really like this. The vibes were eerie, the vibes were spooky, the vibes were good. I will say though, one thing that I really didn't like about the story is how often we had to talk about how beautiful the sisters were. The story was told in first person from Iris's point of view, but every other paragraph was like, me and my sisters are just so eerily beautiful. We're so sexy, like we're just so hot. No one knows what to do with us. Like the oldest sister is a supermodel, and then the middle sister is in a rock band, and they're all just like edgy and cool and sexy, and the oldest sister is always like in Paris, and everybody just wants a piece of her. They just have like this ethereal beauty, and I get that that is part of the story. Like it definitely comes into play as you keep reading, but I just felt like it was overly emphasized. And then there was this plot point where no matter how much food they eat, they're always hungry, but they stay thin, and I just felt like we talked about this so often that I started resenting these characters. I know that it's like bad form to resent someone for being beautiful, and maybe that just goes to show that I am projecting some of my personal feelings about myself onto this book, but I just felt like, okay, I get it. They're hot and sexy. I get it. Like, I'm tired of talking about this. Also, even though Iris told me a million times that they had icy blonde hair, I just kept picturing them all brunette. I don't know what it was. There was just something where I was like, these girlies are brunette, and that's why they're so hot and mysterious and sexy. But no, they're actually blondes, and so I'm sorry for doing that. Also, like I said before you get on me, I know that them being gorgeous and having this ravenous hunger that's never satiated and staying thin was like a part of the whole story and vibes. I just was like, okay, there's probably something for me to unpack there with my therapist about why I didn't like that aspect of the story, but I just thought it was annoying, and I feel like I could have done without it. I feel like I've been complaining, so I do want to emphasize that I am giving this book 4 stars, and that I did really like the writing and a lot of aspects of it, and I would love to read more from this author. But there is one more thing that I want to complain about. There was like this random romance subplot where the main character Iris really had the hots for her older sister's boyfriend that was like trying to help them find her because Gray has gone missing, and so they're looking for her, so Tyler goes with them, and it's very evident that Iris has a crush on him. And so it was just kind of a weird romance thing that was thrown in that I didn't really care for. I feel like he was a fun character, and I did like his sort of light commentary as like spooky things were happening. I feel like he had a sense of humor, and he wasn't really like believing all like the supernatural things that were going on, and so he kind of added some comedy, but I didn't really feel like there being any sort of like attraction between him to Iris needed to be there, and so that kind of annoyed me. But again, overall 4 stars, but there just were things like that that kind of made it feel YA to me. I feel like YA always has to have a romance, and so they like always shove it in even when the book is horror. But that concludes my thoughts about House of Hollow. I do appreciate Cindy recommending this to me because I probably would have never ever picked it up, because I feel like, number one, I'm not really reading YA these days, and then number two, I feel like anytime anyone has talked about this book, they've talked about the body horror, and I'm a little nervous to really get into body horror because I don't like gross things. Like things that are nasty kind of freak me out, and I have tryptophobia, so I don't like anything that's like clusters or just anything that sounds gross. I'm not really into. So I am grateful to Cindy for recommending this because I don't know if I would have liked it otherwise. But so far, Cindy, we got 2 4 stars. You're doing well. Listen, I'm gonna need you to ignore my haggard appearance right now. I cried off all of my makeup earlier while reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
I just want to say fuck you, Cindy, for making me read this book, and fuck Gabrielle 7 for writing that NPC chapter. I will be suing for emotional damages.
Tomorrow and Tomorrow was an iconic slay, I'm afraid, so I will be giving this book 5 stars. It was just so good. Like, Cindy was so right that this was going to be the #1 book that I'd like on this list. This girlie knows me. I just love the writing. I love the storytelling. It was just so fantastic. This book was like a love letter to anyone who enjoys playing video games. I've heard a lot of people online say that you don't have to like video games to like this book. I feel like in general it's about creating things, but I personally love video games and I play them a lot. I was a huge gamer when I was a kid. I loved CD-ROM games like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego and the Nancy Drew games. Those were all very iconic to me. And then eventually I moved on to having a Game Boy, and so I played a lot of different things there. And then I didn't really play games for a long time, but since dating my boyfriend the past few years, I've gotten back into it. And like I said, we really share that together in our relationship. And he also bought me a Nintendo Switch like 2 Christmases ago. So I've just been really loving gaming and storytelling and that art form. I definitely don't think that you have to love video games to enjoy this book, because it is also an exploration of 2 flawed individuals coming together and having a friendship where the love is so deep that it surpasses like romantic relationships. I feel like if you're someone that has been looking for a book that doesn't really center a romantic relationship between the 2 main characters, you really would enjoy this book. I will say these characters can be quite frustrating. They do not know how to communicate. Like, they would rather die than tell each other how they feel. So that could be a little bit frustrating while I was reading this book, but ultimately it was just so beautiful. And as you saw from that clip, I was crying, sobbing, weeping over some things that happened. It actually was to the point where my boyfriend came running into the bedroom because he was like, oh my God, are you okay? And then I was like, no, it's just my book. And he was like, oh, okay. The writing was just immaculate. The storytelling was fantastic. I loved the way that Gabrielle Zevin sort of jumped around in the timeline, giving us the history of these characters. And I also feel like she very flawlessly went in between the limited second person. So at times we were following Sam, and then other times we were following Sadie. And so I loved having those limited experiences because I could see what each character was feeling at different points in time. And you could totally see the breakdown in communication happening. The way that Gabrielle Zevin describes video games in this is so intricate. It really feels like she knows what she's talking about. I honestly want to Google her and see if she's ever been like a game developer or if she personally knows one, because it really felt like she knew her stuff, and she really transported me whenever she would be describing the games and how the gameplay worked. And so I was really loving that as someone who enjoys games. I grew to love each and every character, even the side characters. I loved Mark's, and I loved Sam's grandparents. I loved Sadie's grandma. I loved everyone. Oh my God, I'm gonna start crying again. Like, sometimes I wanted to punch Sadie and Sam in the face because they were so fucking stupid. But their story really touched me. Why do I always cry during TBR takeovers? If you haven't seen it, when Monica made me read Pachinko, I boo-hoo sobbed and wept on camera for all of you to see, and here I am crying again. There's something about books, about flawed human experiences of people interacting and things not always going well, but it just being so reflective of real life, that just like touched me so truly to my core. Did that sentence even make sense? I don't know. I really loved this book. It just is such a beautiful love letter to creating stories and creating things and being a creative person. And it was just so phenomenal. I definitely want to read more from Gabrielle Zevin. I really hope that our other books pack as much of a punch as this one did. I loved it. It was so good. It's definitely going to be on my favorite books of this year. And I don't know, it was just a book that really worked for me. I have seen some critiques of it. I feel like some people said the first half is better than the second half, or they didn't particularly love certain things that happened in the story. And I could definitely see why people would feel that way, but it just really worked for me. I am starting to really love imperfect stories about imperfect people. I don't know why. Like, I feel like I'm just like getting older, more mature, more wise. Like, when I was in my early 20s, I feel like I only wanted happy books that maybe were like a little bit angsty, but in general just sort of made me feel good by the end of them. But I feel like more recently I've been enjoying things that end more open-endedly, or end in a sad way, or just sort of like nostalgic, or very humanized. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but I just loved this so much. So beautiful. It also really made me think about pachinko a lot while I was reading it, but I don't know why, because this is not a generational story, but I think that the audiobook narrator might have been the same one, and maybe that's why I was connecting them. But it had the same sort of just feeling of like, these are just human people that I'm actually witnessing, like real people who are making the wrong decision sometimes, and I have to be a bystander just like watching it happen. But I'm also like so in love with them as characters, if that makes any sense. I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but I loved this book so much. I'm so glad that Cindy had me read it. It definitely was on my TBR, but I didn't have any plans to read it. So for it to move up so quickly and then for me to give it 5 stars, it's just such a slay. I love that for us. But that brings us to the end of this episode of TBR Takeover. I want to say thank you again to Cindy for participating and giving me books to read. I love you so much, girl. Also, let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts are. And if you made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, feel free to use the toilet emoji in your comments, because I feel like that's very fitting for me and Cindy, especially with what happened while we were in LA together. She will know what I mean. I feel like we talked about it earlier in the video. Hot girls have tummy troubles, okay? Thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.